First, we'll stand and ask Councilmember McCullough to lead us in the flag salute.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll move on in our agenda to closed session report. Thank you, Mike.
The council and agents met in closed session on the items listed on the agenda. The items involving Jerry Johnson, the Mark Gabay, Star Canyon Resorts, those items were not discussed. The item involving the Winter property, real estate negotiations, we gave a status report. Direction was given for further negotiation. The litigation item concerning the Prairie Schooner parcel was not discussed. The items for the city, real property negotiations with Desert Water Agency, the Burr Group, Shadow Rock, Mark Bragg, Greyhound, and Swank on the golf course. None of those items were discussed. The litigation matter involving the Center for Biological Diversity, Classic property, that was not discussed. The exposure to litigation, we discussed one possible matter. No action was taken, and the initiation of litigation was not discussed. The item that was added to the supplemental agenda involving El Dorado litigation matter was also not discussed.
Thank you. At this time, we will open the floor to public comments. Anyone who would like to speak in public comments, please come forward at this time. You will have 3 minutes. Give your name to the clerk. Good evening.
Good evening, Council.
I'm sorry, by the way, that I misspoke. There were on the exposure litigation and the initiation of litigation. We actually discussed one litigation matter and two exposure matters, and no action was taken.
Thank you.
Howard Lapham, 50-year-old resident of Palm, 50-year resident. I wish there was. I'm speaking tonight on the excessive sewer fees imposed on Smoke Tree Inn for the conversion of the 52 hotel units into 50 studio apartments and one-bedroom unit, with only the addition of one kitchen sink, 2 fixture unit counts with without dishwater, washer, and garbage disposal. Now, you all have in your packet these 4 deals, so I won't go into that. However, I'd like to reiterate, in reevaluating these sewer facility fees, there should be several categories in the residential units for the following reasons. Does it make common sense or fairness to charge the same fee for a 380 square foot studio with 13 fixture units as a 1,200 and 1,500 2-bedroom, 2-bath with dishwasher and garbage disposal with 33 fixture units, 2.5 times the studio, or with a 3-bedroom, 3-bath would be a 3.5 times, and you go on from there? I think not. These Smoke Tree studio units are no more than a hotel unit with kitchenette with long-term stay. Smoke Tree Inn supplies much-needed housing for working and professional singles with studios that cost only $625 to $650 per month, with all utilities included in a resort atmosphere. We would appreciate your assistance in helping Smoke Tree Inn to make this costly conversion with the upgrades by correcting this excessive fee. I hope I see you guys tomorrow at our Palm Springs Economic Development Corporation meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Larry Miller. I'm the managing partner at Smoke Tree, and I've been an investor in Palm Springs for over 5 years, and I have a second home here. I love the area, and I've really been elated to hear that this council is pro-business. And I have to tell you that I've already experienced a more user-friendly attitude, and I really appreciate that. One of the things that this council has done is they continued the temporary suspension of some of the sewer connection fees, and that has been very helpful. However, there's more work to be done. The problem, as I see it, Howard alluded to just a little bit. In your resolution 2778, that was the one that talked about the city sewer facility fee that was partially suspended. And they have certain categories. One is for residential units. The fee for a residential unit is now $2,408 per residential unit. The fee for a hotel room without kitchens is $1,046. And so what we were charged was about $1,400 per unit as a sewer connection fee for a sewer course that's already connected. And all we added was one little kitchen sink. When I went to the city, I talked to the engineering department, I talked to the building department, and they said, you know, it seems to me that the fee ought to be based on a fixture unit. For commercial and industrial units, for example, the charge is $203 per fixture unit. So to just add a sink, whether you call that one fixture unit or even two fixture units, it seems to me that a fair fee, a more equitable fee, is based on fixture units. Now, you have done a development study, and I looked at the cost of service analysis for building on page 18. Now, they don't talk about sewer connection fees in there, but I note that it says that the purpose was to justify fees for the purposes of reconciling to City Council that building fees are directly proportionate to the cost of providing services. I think that's reasonable, but that's not what happens with the sewer connection fees, which incidentally does not go to the city. That goes to wastewater treatment. So what I'd like to see happen is that the council ask the staff to conduct a study to have a more equitable allocation for sewer connection fees based on fixture units. And I would be happy to assist them in whatever way I could. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Good evening, and thank you. Queen Scheherazade, I presume. Please come forward. Yes.
Sit? All right. Here, you sit here. Okay. In here. Okay. Talk in here? Okay. My name is Brooke Akers. I'm Queen Scheherazade for 2004 for the Riverside County Fair.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is Cecilia Lavariega. She's Princess Jasmine.
Yeah.
Natalie Tarr, who is Princess Dunyazad, she won't be here tonight. She's traveling from Lake Elsinore, so she couldn't make it. But we just wanted to come and say hello and kind of give you a extended welcome to you and all the residents of Palm Springs.
And we would just like to thank you for your continuous support to the National Date Fair. And we just want to thank you for all the support and all the pride you have and all the support you've given us.
Thank you. Let's give them a hand.
Okay. So I give this to you to post up.
Mr. Mayor, could you ask them the date of the...
Yes.
I'm sorry. That's my job. I'm very sorry. The fair is going to be February 13th through the 22nd.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you.
And thank you.
Queen Jasmine is a resident of Palm Springs.
Ah. Yeah. If there's anyone else who would like to speak in public comments, please come forward at this time. Then we will close public comments. City manager comments, follow-up and requests.
Mr. Mayor, we do have a request from the Tribal Council regarding our next quarterly meeting. the election of the tribal council members will be March the 16th. Therefore, the tribe is recommending the following dates to meet, and they have a choice of March 24th, 25th, the 31st, or the 1st. They will be hosting the meeting this time, and we would need to get back to them after a council consensus.
And that's April 1st?
Yes.
We want to do that later.
No, that's okay. Repeat the dates again, please.
Yes, March 24th, 25th, 31st, or April the 1st.
You can't do it on the 24th because that's a Wednesday. So.
It's Wednesday.
Yeah, it is Wednesday. And I think the 31st is 24th and 31st.
26th.
No, not the 26th.
The 25th, the 31st, or the 1st.
What about the 25th?
Okay.
It's a Thursday. It's a Thursday.
It would be a Thursday.
It's okay with me? Okay. Something about April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
And this report has come to you from Kermit the Frog.
So I can confirm with them dated the 25th.
Yes, 24th. Yes.
24th at 6 p.m.
What time is it?
Yeah, 6.
It'll be 6 p.m. with a probably preceded by a closed session.
Okay.
You know, if you have
Yes.
one of these, it's really easy.
Okay, we will begin with our study session topics, and the first thing on our agenda this evening is the quarterly budget review.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I would ask Tom Kanar, our finance director, to come to this podium. I would like to make a couple just brief opening comments. As part of this fiscal quarterly budget update, there are a couple of things we need to do is let you know where we are for the balance of this year, which is 03-04, and more importantly, let you know where we're headed with the 04-05 budget, which is going to be heavily impacted by what happens at the state. Now, what happens in Sacramento certainly is beyond our control in one aspect, but it's certainly not beyond our burden, because we could face anywhere between $3 and $8 million worth of a deficit going into next year, depending upon how things are decided in Sacramento. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the microphone over to Tom, and probably for the most of the evening over to Troy, since I'm being able to talk less and less. I do apologize. But I would note that as part of this discussion, Councilmember Mills had requested information on our hiring practices, and that will be an important part of this discussion that we'll have as soon as he gives you the numbers on 04 and then 05. Thomas, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, you have before you a packet for the second quarter budget review of fiscal 04-05. Excuse me, 03-04, and it includes in there some information about 04-05. There are copies available for the audience on a chair behind me, and if anyone needs one, there's some there. And they'll be available, or the pages will be available on the TV screen for viewers at home. On page 1, just a kind of a snapshot, I wanted to give you a flavor for what was happening between the state budget and the city budget. We took this back, and this is a chart we've presented to council a number of times. It shows the city's budget back in 91, 92, and we're in millions of dollars, and the state, of course, is in billions of dollars. But the green line is the city's budget, and you can see that that's trended just for most of that period of time, just under, and is currently under the inflation rate for that whole period of time. So we've kept a pretty good handle on our budgets, I think, as most cities and local governments have. The state, unfortunately, trended far higher than the inflation rate, and that's what got them into the problems. That's why we bring these as early as possible when we're projecting budget deficits to you, to let you know so that we can start doing something about them in a early enough time mode that we can solve the problem without getting into real crises. The summary, and it really is on page 2, it's really a tale of 2 years here. Fiscal 0304, we adopted the budget with just over $1 million deficit. So the estimates that we presented to you last June or so when you adopted the budget predicted that the deficit would be $1,005,000. I'm happy to report to you that with the increased revenue, primarily from building and planning, engineering, all those kinds of fees, building-related fees, that the deficit that we're looking at now is about $215,000 for the fiscal 0304 year. That includes, by the way, a reduction in the vehicle license fee of $800,000. And we'll get into that a little bit later. That money is supposed to be paid back to us, but certainly will not be paid back in this fiscal year. So that's all of these numbers already. I am not optimistic that when the year 2006 rolls around that the state will actually honor that. They said they have, but we've heard that story before. We'll see what happens there. But at any rate, as far as the vehicle license fee is concerned for the current fiscal year, that's built into these numbers. Without that, we would have been in a surplus situation. Page 3 gives you a little discussion about where we expect the cash balances to be. We started the fiscal year with just about $7.8 million. If we continue on as I expected with a small deficit for the current year, we'll be at just under $7.6 million. So we're in a reasonably strong cash position, and this is just the operating fund cash, I should point out. It doesn't include the airport or the wastewater treatment plant or any of the other major funds. This is just general fund and community promotion fund. Some of the major changes in the fiscal 0304 estimates on page 4. Property taxes are coming in even stronger than I had predicted, primarily because of resales, both the volume and the dollar amount of those resales of both residential and commercial property, and just a phenomenal amount of new building. And again, I'll touch on that a little bit later. TOT, unfortunately, I don't believe we will make the revenue estimates that we started out the year with. That's down for right now. We do have a couple of situations where the spa hotel TOT has gone away because of the tribal council's decision to impose a tribal TOT as opposed to a city TOT. The Marquis Hotel, which I had hoped would be open again, or open by now, is still closed. And so that's adversely affecting it. The revenue estimates do include the $12,915,000 for this fiscal year, do include the rate increase that will go into effect, or has gone into effect, on January 1st for the group meeting hotels. That rate was approved by the voters last November and went from 12.5% to 13.5% for basically the larger hotels in town. There's about a dozen of them. And the rate for the other hotels stayed the same. As I said, motor vehicle license fees, I've taken out the amount that we stand to lose in the current fiscal year. And in fact, that's we've already not received it. We've received a lower amount. The backfill part of it has gone away. We have lease revenue from agreement with the Agua Caliente tribe. That's new revenue that was not in place before we started the budget year. That's $434,000. And the last three categories that I have on this page, the new development tax, the building permits, and the plan check fees, you can see that I was kind of conservative on the revenue estimates. Really not that far from where we ended up the previous fiscal year, but we are just writing a lot more building permits. One example, the new development tax, which is basically just a square foot, 40 cents per square foot for new building. Last fiscal year, we took in $366,000 for the whole fiscal year. This year through December, we're at about $525,000 through the first 6 months of the fiscal year. And with all the things that are on the books right now, I think that's going to continue, and that will bring in about $1 million, more than 3 times what our original budget estimate was. So that's the really good news that we have to present to you tonight. And you can see there are no major changes in appropriations or transfers in or out. Page 5 gives you a little bit more detail on some of the revenue items. We expect property tax to be up about just under 8% over last year. TOT to be up about 4%, but unfortunately that's with the rate increase in there, so it's only slightly over last year, a very small increase over last year. Sales tax is trending up, however, better, and that's going to be about 10.6% higher. And you can see the other rates essentially up or down, staying there, pretty much inflationary increases on those. On utility users tax, franchise fees, and except for motor vehicle license fees, as I said, which went down. Page 6 has a detail of all other revenue. This just breaks down that rather large category on the previous page. And again, I've reprised some of the areas, the plan check fees and building permits fees and things like that. You can see the percentage increases on those. Building permits ought to be about 43% higher than all of last year. If there are any questions as I'm going through here, please stop and I'll try to answer those.
One question on the previous page.
Ms. Funk.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Which was the administrative service charges that are down 2.14%. What does that include?
The administrative service charges are the costs that are budgeted in the general fund, like the city manager's office, finance, human resources, part of the city attorney's costs, things like that, that are charged out to other the enterprise funds or other non-general fund funds. So they become cost to those funds for the service that we provide for those. And it's an internal charge from the general fund to, say, the airport fund, wastewater treatment plant, some of the special revenue funds, places like that. And the reason it's down a bit is because we had reduced our expenses in those areas, and so the amount we're able to charge out to the other places went down also.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
Tom, under the TOT, realizing we don't have the marquee and we don't have the spa now, and you look at the report we got in our last packet shows our TOT off 13.4% or something along that line. If you factor in or factor out the marquee rooms and the spa rooms, how is the TOT for the rest of the city holding?
I did that for my own purposes, so I have it here. Thank you. And you mentioned it was down about 14% for the month of November. For the first 5 months of the fiscal year, the TOT is down about 6%. If you take out the marquee and the spa hotel, we're up about 1%. So the other hotels are more or less staying even, or on average, I should say, anyway.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
So unless there's any questions about where we think we're going to be in 0304, I think I'll move on to fiscal year 0405. Page 7 shows some projections into next fiscal year. And, of course, we always have to make assumptions here. I'm projecting that property tax will continue to grow at about the current rate, 7.5%, that TOT will rebound and go up about 6%. And part of that is the rate increase will be in there for the entire fiscal year as opposed to just 6 months in the current fiscal year. Sales tax going up 4%, and motor vehicle license fees, the most important change there, going back up to the current level of $2.7 million. So that's a 42% increase, but that's off the reduced base for the current year of $1,900,000. We're going to experience...
Thomas, will you please explain the caveat on that, though? On the VLF.
On the VLF? Well, you know, the big thing there is that the state has promised, or at least the governor has promised, that the motor vehicle license fee or the car tax backfill will continue to be maintained. As you know, the car tax itself was reduced, so the amount that consumers are paying, car owners or vehicle owners, is about 1/3 of what the rate is. The state's making up the rest of it from their general fund. The current budget, as proposed, has the cities and counties being made whole for that gap, and it's called backfill. And I'm presuming that that will be honored and that will be in there. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, I think, because there's several issues about what the state could do to us. And at this point, I don't know that anybody really knows the answer, whether from the governor on down. It's going to play out in the whole state process of putting their budget together. But we'll try to quantify what those potentials are there.
Let's vote.
Does the fill of that motor vehicle license fee have anything to do with whether or not the voters approve Proposition, what is it, 58? Is that all part of that bond measure?
That's a separate issue, but I would expect that if that doesn't go through, that there could be pressures to back away from the promise to continue the backfill. So, and the proposition you referred to would authorize the state to borrow money, in effect, to fill their budget gap. And it's a lot more complicated than that, and we'll save that for a little bit later. If the voters decide not to do that, I think then the governor and the legislature will be put in a position of having to relook at what they've proposed so far. So that's the risk, yes. The backfill could go away, but it isn't tied directly to that measure. There's nothing in there that the voters would say yes or no to.
And then, Tom, that drops down about 40%. Drops down to 40% instead of increases.
It'll drop down. It'll take about 2/3 of that $2.7 million that I have in there and make our projections for next year about $1,800,000 worse. On the expenditure side, and again, these are just early projections. I do caution you on that because there's always things that come in as part of the budget submissions and things that just go up and down, and it's hard to give you. So I've taken some broad categories here. Expecting wages to go up about 4%. Both the general unit and the management professionals supervisory unit have a contract in place that will give them a 2% pay raise on July 1st. The police safety units and the fire safety units are coming up for negotiations. I put 4% in there to try to cover the total, what I think could be the total cost of pay packages. That may or may not be the numbers that are arrived at the end, but for projection purposes. The big thing that's going to be going up is our PERS rates. We already know what our PERS rates are. And perhaps you could skip over to page 9, and you can see what's happening with those. The rates in the current fiscal year for non-safety employees, everybody who's not a policeman or fireman, basically, is 11.7% of salary, and that's going up to 25.2%. The safety rates are going up from around 31% to both over 46%. There's a separate plan for police and one for fire. So we're going to experience significant increases in the cost of our pension plan. And if we might as well cover that, skipping over to page 10, you can see where that's coming from. The largest portion of the adjustment that we're going to be suffering is coming from, in effect, market rate adjustments from CalPERS, from the company or the pension plan that provides pension benefits for city employees. When things were going really well and the PERS was making a lot of money in the stock market, our rates were very low. As a matter of fact, lower than Social Security rates. Unfortunately, the PERS, as most investors did, suffered reversals in the last 3 years. And our rates are, in some respects, based on that, how well they perform in the stock market. And when they don't do well, the costs are passed along to us. And virtually every city in California is experiencing these kinds of rate increases, at least percentage-wise. Going back to page 7, again, there's a couple of things in there. One, we took out a number of balances or cash balances in the current fiscal year to help balance the current year budget. Those aren't going to be available, transfers from other funds. Those won't be available next year, or I don't expect them to. Those funds are basically break even for the most part, and they may have some small savings, but they're not going to have the large cash balances that they did this year. On the debt side, I've increased the amount dedicated to the convention center financing by the same amount that was increased, the TOT rate increase went in, and expect that to hold firm. We're also going to have the parking structure debt service kick in 0405. We've been fortunate, the rates have been very low. It's a taxable bond issue with a variable interest rate, and we've probably averaged at this year, perhaps 1.5% interest rate, and even adding on the cost of the letter of credit and some other financing costs, we're probably, that money's costing us 3 or 3.5%, perhaps somewhere around there. However, we have to start paying that back eventually, and that those costs had come from the capitalized interest. When we borrowed the money originally, we put enough money aside to cover interest for a period of time. It's lasting longer than we expected, and so as in effect saves us money on the operational budget. But that's kicking in next year. So if all of those things happen and the state didn't do anything to us, we would be looking at about a $3.8 million deficit for fiscal 0405. That's about, and it gets a little worse in 0506, and the further out you get, the harder it is to project these things, obviously. Probably would level off at about that level at $4.2 million deficit in 0506. I think probably start to get better as the stock market comes around, PERS does better, our cost on pensions go down, some other things come into play. On page 8 just gives you some of the detail of the major changes in 0405. And again, the major changes is on the PERS cost. Page 11 and 12 show you the hotel average daily rate and the hotel occupancy rates for the current fiscal year and the previous 2 fiscal years. And we're running just about the same. And as I mentioned to Mr. Mills earlier, these, as you can see where these are, these charts are showing here, the 1% gain in overall, excluding the 2 hotels that went out of the mix. These are reflected in these charts. So the hotel average daily rate is really close so far for this fiscal year, as is the occupancy rate. Page 13 and 14 show you a little bit of a snapshot for the first 2 quarters of the Tahquitz Creek Resort Course. This is important because the general fund has to subsidize the golf course, and if it doesn't make money after paying operational cost and debt service, then the only place that comes from is the general fund. In the current fiscal year, we had expected to transfer in, or do expect to transfer in, $600,000 into the golf course fund, and I think that's probably about accurate. It may be a little bit less than that. We may be doing a little better on the old course. We get some of the revenue from there. The Tahquitz Creek course is down a little bit compared for the first 6 months compared to where the budget was. Overall, though, we should be about right on target on the budget for there. We're hoping for 0405, of course, that the course can get turned around, add 5,000-6,000 rounds of golf to that place, and start to turn at least a break even, so where there isn't so much of a subsidy from the general fund. And page 15 is where it really starts to get ugly. We charted it here.
It was pretty so far.
Well, the current fiscal year wasn't. It's got to be at least a 5 anyway, right? Not a 10. The current fiscal year, as we said, we think we're going to end up with a very small deficit, maybe even get lucky and turn that into a surplus by the end of the year. Next fiscal year, as I said, without any other kinds of things happening, we're looking at about $3.8 million deficit. However, if the motor vehicle backfill goes away, that's another $1.8 million loss revenue to the city, and therefore brings the deficit up to about $5.6 million. If the sales tax adjustment goes away, now let me spend a moment on that. The state has a proposal called a triple flip, and this is the one that's going to be on the ballot in March.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can explain this one to where I understand
Good
it.
luck.
Even. Basically, what the state is talking about, in the current version of it anyway, is that they would take 0.25% of the 1% local sales tax. So the city gets 1% of all sales in Palm Springs and comes back to the city as sales tax revenue. The state would take 0.25% of that, or about $1,800,000 away from the city and, of course, from everybody else. They would use the sales tax money to back the bonds that are on the ballot in March, and some other general fund revenues, but the primary source of repayment are the sales tax revenues. Now, the story is that they would then switch out or pay us additional property taxes to make up for that triple flip of the sales tax. And I'm not quite sure where they came up with the term triple flip, but that's what they've been calling it. So if everything else worked out evenly, in the long run, the city would come out even. We would lose sales tax revenue, but we would get a like amount in annual property tax. And the only thing we would lose is the money would come in a little bit slower because property taxes are paid twice a year to the city, where sales tax is paid monthly, so we'd lose some of the ability to invest those funds. But essentially would be made whole. The big caveat, of course, is will the state actually honor that? Will they continue to pay us they'll take the sales tax away. That part will be pretty clear. I don't think they'll have too much trouble doing the math on that one. But will they actually pay us back, or cause the counties to pay back, the additional property tax money? If they don't, that's about another $1,825,000. So that brings our budget deficit up to $7,425,000. And then the last thing is, in the governor's proposal, there's something called ERAF, Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund. And this has been going on for a long time, where the city's actually property taxes are reduced, paid over to the schools. That reduces the state's responsibility for paying towards the schools, reduces our revenue. Right now, Palm Springs contributes an additional $2.5 million a year that we would be getting in property taxes otherwise if the state hadn't done this in their last budget set of problems in 1992. The governor's proposal increases that ERAF transfer by another $575,000, our share of that. Statewide, it's about $189 million. So if that gets added in there, if we lose that, then we're up to about $8 million. It's hard to say which pieces of this will be submitted, acted upon, but I think in the worst case scenario, we'd be looking at an $8 million deficit if they took all of those sources of funding away from us.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mills.
I think I figured out after Tom's explanation, I think I figured out what the triple flip is. It's a hand gesture. So.
I couldn't help thinking when the young ladies were here about the date festival. I mean, maybe we should have had somebody from the governor's office, and it could have been Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. But anyway, page 16 kind of talks about lists what I just talked about. The potential loss of the vehicle license, the car tax, is $1.8 million. The triple flip would be about $1.850,000, somewhere in that vicinity. And I didn't mention the $575,000, because here we're focusing on just the general fund, a $575,000 loss of property tax to the general fund. We'd also have an additional loss from the redevelopment agency of $270,000. Now, I guess if you look at it as good news, we already have that in our budget because we've had to pay that this year. I actually haven't processed the check yet because it's not due till May 1st, and so I didn't want to pay it early. But it's $277,000 in the current fiscal year, so it'll be something similar for next fiscal year. So it won't be something that will increase the burden on us, but it's still money that was taken away or would be taken away that we wouldn't be able to use. We obviously also have to consider what's going to happen with the convention center expansion and the financing. How much is it going to cost? What is the shape of that financing going to look like? And we'll be bringing back some alternatives for you on that when that time comes, when we finally get a good idea about what the final price is. The budget does include, both this fiscal year and next fiscal year, I do want to warn you on this, a continuation of the high level of building activity. I mean, from what I can see, what's going through the development process, the information we get from the planning and the engineering departments, there's still a lot of activity. There's a lot of projects that are on the books out there, and we expect that level to continue.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Punier.
Tom, were you as conservative looking for the next year as you were this previous year? Or did
No.
You were not?
You know, I hope I'm not being too optimistic, but you know, I don't know that it's always hard to say, because a really major project could come in at the last minute or fall off at the last minute and have a big impact on building. But there are just so many things that are out there right now. We expect, not just we expect it to continue at this level. But I did build those higher numbers into next year's budget.
Okay.
And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you'll have labor negotiations with the police and fire units, and that'll have some impact on the eventual shape of our budget. So what can we do? I was hoping you had some ideas. No, we have a list of things here, and you know, we're looking for either some direction or areas you want to focus on, or maybe we just take a look at everything and try to do pieces out of everything. We can reduce capital expenditures. We can try to negotiate for pay and or benefit reductions. We can eliminate staff position, reduce services. We could try to see if there's a way to utilize Indian Gaming Revenue Fund for current expenses. That may be a tricky proposition. Later on in the agenda, you're going to be talking about increasing the building and planning fees, and some other city fees may come along with that. So we could take a look at what that level should be. We could ask voters to approve tax increases. And I've stayed away from revenue enhancements and things like that and other ways of saying it. It's tax increases. And if the voters want to maintain services and there's no other way around it, then that's their choice they're going to have to make. But we could take a look at the admissions tax, which was something that was brought up by the Budget Task Force, a police safety assessment district, a local sales tax, which is not an option that's really been too easily implementable in the past, but some new state legislation would make it possible and without a great degree of difficulty. We could also take, it's not on the list here, but a landscaping and lighting district. And again, all of these things would have to be approved by the voters before they could be implemented. We're going to be looking at refinancing bond issues where feasible. As I mentioned earlier, the redevelopment agency is going to have to pay ERAF next year. I mean, that's almost a certainty, I think, out of the redevelopment agency. Just a couple of days before I got that information, I was looking with our financial advisor at one of the existing bond issues in the redevelopment agency, and we think we can refinance that one and actually save quite a bit of money, or alternatively raise money for new projects. And we were kind of happy about that, but I got a feeling that whatever we save in the refinancing is going to get eaten up by our additional contribution to the state. We can take a look at naming rights to city facilities, for instance, the skate park or maybe some other city facilities. We could encourage annexations, and those are somewhat out of our hands because those are resident-driven. But if we did pull some of the immediately adjacent areas into the city of Palm Springs, places we're pretty much providing all the services to already, like Park Andreas, it would probably make sense, certainly from the city's standpoint, the additional revenue that we would get from property tax and so forth. And we could take a look at charge for parking in the downtown parking structure. That would ease some of the debt service burden on the general fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions or take notes and providing any additional information. And that concludes my report.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Punier.
Maybe David, Troy, or Tom, what would be helpful for me briefly is take me through the internal process and the timeline in developing the budget.
Okay. Well, this is really the first step to try to give council just a really broad overview of where the trends are for where the budget is. Somewhere near the end of this month, we'll send out budget worksheets to the departments and ask them to estimate what they think they're going to spend. We provide them with projections of the personnel cost and PERS and all those kinds of things, insurance costs. So there really isn't too many other things. And then we ask them to come back to us with changes to their budget, additional capital items, major projects that they might have, and things like that. That gets through a review process, first with me to make sure the math's correct, then secondly with the city manager if there is policy issues that are to be decided there or to be recommended. And then at that point, sometime about April or so, we'll start to bring the budget back to the council and say, these are our recommendations, or the recommendations of the city manager to you, that we add a position here or delete a position there, or we include this project and not include this one. And at that point, then the council gets involved in the discussion. It's typically about a month and a half or so, usually about 3 or 4 study sessions and maybe a council meeting. We try to have at least 2 council meetings so people have public comments and have any input from the public on that. And of course, during the study sessions, they also can come up and provide input if they choose to at that time. And we'd like to get it on the agenda. We try to do it in the first meeting in June, so that gives us enough time to implement it and get it, makes the transition easier, makes the accounting easier to get it on July 1st.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. McCullough.
I would like to ask Mr. Kennard to, on the, ask voters for approved tax increases, to give us a timeline on that, when those, when the general elections are and when the door or window closes, in order to have something on the ballot for that. And then also, could you just make a bullet point and add Mello-Roos? I would like to see a report on Mello-Roos as a potential source of revenue.
Okay. As far as the timelines, Mr. McCullough, I think I would defer to the city clerk, and she might be able to give you a better idea on those deadlines.
Go ahead. Well, there are some established election dates. First, we've already missed the first one coming up. We've also missed the second one. So the next possible established date would be in November. August, about the 6th would be the deadline to put something on the ballot for then. The council also has the ability to call a special election at any time, 88 days out. So you don't have to go with an established date. The cost typically for a special call would be, that cannot be consolidated with anything else going on, would be run around $25,000.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager?
Yes, we want to.
Yeah. Could you have someone give us a little more information on the police safety assessment district?
Yes, I would defer to Troy Bootslow. Thank you.
Well, I may ask for Mr. Kennard's help in this. A police safety assessment district can take various forms. In Indian Wells, and actually in the Three Cove cities of Indian Wells, Palm Desert, and Rancho Mirage, those cities charge special assessment on the property tax rolls that goes to pay for certain public safety services. For example, in Indian Wells, it's called an emergency upgrade tax, and it's used to pay for paramedic services. There's a similar tax in Rancho Mirage. It's used to pay for fire services. Cities across the state of California have enacted similar types of taxes or assessments and use those to pay for public safety services. One of the things that we're looking at here is an assessment district that would pay for public safety services, and that would have to go to a vote of the people. It would take a 2/3 vote to pass, and if it's approved, then you could use the monies collected from that assessment to pay for your public safety services, whether it be police, fire, or both services combined.
I might just make one comment. In terms of election issues, under Prop 218, to the extent we have a tax that's for a general purpose and simply goes into the general fund, such as the TOT, the recent election we had, the voting requirement for that is just a majority vote. To the extent you have a tax that is for a special limited purpose, just goes to that purpose, like for example, if you had this police safety tax, and that tax is going to go to to just support a part of your activity, in other words, police activity, safety, that requires a 2/3 vote, which when you break that down, what that means for every person that votes no, you got to have 2 people voting yes in order to pass it. So that it's a much, even though obviously the police and safety services are something that people feel much more strongly about supporting, the question is whether the strength of that feeling is going to be such that you can attain that extra voting requirement.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Folt.
Does that mean that the, like, let's say that particular assessment fee would raise $2 million? Does that mean we increase the budget of the police department $2 million, or that means that we can use other funds, take funds that we would have from the general fund away and supplement that $2 million?
It basically means you shift the current general fund obligation that we pay for those services, and you use the special assessment to pay for those services.
Okay.
Although that's the choice when you structure it. You don't. The theory behind doing that doesn't really do you any good if you can only pay for additional services. But to the extent there's a shifting of the burden, sometimes that is perceived negatively because people are voting for something they're already getting. But so that's you have options in terms of structuring it and what sort of commitments you're going to make.
Yeah, well, 218 is so restrictive in so many other areas about only being allowed to, to recoup what your costs are, that's why I asked that question.
You could theoretically do that, but it again has to do with how you structure it.
Okay. I know that the issue of the admissions tax came to us briefly from the committee. I don't know, Ms. Folt, if you'd want to say a word about that.
Well, the Budget Task Force did discuss the admissions tax and then did agree to pass it on to the City Council. What the admissions tax is, a tax that many cities have on events and on venues that are within the city. For instance, in our city, we have the water park, which I believe last year had about 136,000 people that went through the water park. The city received nothing from that other than if they were buying food or whatever they trinkets at the souvenir shop. The Follies also had somewhere in the neighborhood of about probably around 170,000 people that went through that. Those two venues, I think, in particular, are important because those are mostly venues that are not used by the citizens of the city and could return a substantial amount of money to the city. But then there's other venues like the movie theaters, the museum, whatever else that you charged an admission to, in which the city could impose a tax on it. I don't remember, I don't know, maybe Mike remembers what we were suggesting. Was it 2% or 4%? I don't remember what that discussion was. But it would add probably around 20 cents to a movie theater ticket. But the Follies, for instance, it would add a significant amount more because their tickets range from $35 to $70 per person. And so I think at one point the figures we came up with, it would be somewhere between $600,000 to $800,000 without doing any investigation as to what the actual revenues were from those venues.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. McCullough.
I believe I need to clarify something on the budget task force. We were in a situation to where we were meeting a deadline to come to a study session, and my recollection is that that we had different subcommittees. In the Revenue Enhancement Subcommittee, only one member out of three, I think, was able to make the meeting immediately before our report went out, and so that subcommittee's report was a part of the report to City Council. However,
it was never really discussed or voted on
By the
to be
majority.
moved forward by the whole budget committee.
The admissions tax went separate from that. It was not, that, yeah, I agree with you on that, but the admission tax we had talked about
Yeah,
with the city council
that-
prior to that.
That's my recollection. I just wanted to make it clear that that the budget task force's job, I don't think anyone who served on the budget task force really felt that they had finished the job. It was a preliminary
Right.
report, and that may be something we might want to discuss tonight, is maybe moving that group forward in some form.
Yeah, I remember the report. I just wanted to know exactly what the taxation process was about and who you were looking at, just for information to the community. Mike, I don't know if you want to say something about the Mello-Roos, what you're looking for there.
That was one area where I think that the budget task force was going to continue. If we continued to work, we were going. That was one of the items on the list of potential revenue enhancements. For those who don't know, the Mello-Roos is a manner in which, on new developments, there can be taxes that will be collected incrementally, and it can go to general fund items such as public safety. And some communities have used that. It's quite controversial. You can see signs sometimes at developments that say no Mello-Roos. Also, developers tend to use Mello-Roos for things like street improvements and things. So the developers actually like it when they can use it to do some of the street improvements and sewers and such.
Right.
They don't really like it whenever it's assessed by the city and for general fund items, fire, police and safety and such. And it can go not only for, unlike Quimby, where the Quimby Act has to be spent on new construction of parks, the Mello-Roos can actually go to pay things like salaries and benefits and things of public safety officers. So that was an area that we never really got to on the budget task force. I think we would have had we continued. So I just want to make sure that that was added to that list.
Just on the elimination of staff positions and the reduction of services, certainly not too long ago we made some cuts in order to make the budget adjustments. Just an indication, I don't know if you're this far along, but where will we begin to cut? Because I think that we were pretty close at the last budget crisis.
Last year, we eliminated 17 and a half positions, mainly from this side of government, the support services, City Hall. We did not eliminate any public safety positions. To cut any more positions from this side of City Hall would start to cut deeply into the city services and the level of support that we provide the community. So it would be a very treacherous thing and would have to be done very carefully to make sure that those services aren't being cut to a
With the
point.
savings of how much for those 17 positions? Do you remember?
Tom, do you remember what the total salary savings was?
I think it was just over $1 million, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor?
Was there some attrition there, and the positions just weren't
Yeah,
filled?
there were some positions that retired out, so there was some attrition that way. Others were just simply laid off.
Council, are there any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
One of the things that we talked about briefly, or we have talked about in the past briefly, was and I don't remember the exact word, Tom, but it was like a services tax referring to if you used an ambulance service, if you use fire department services, that there was a fee that went along with that actual use. And I know that's not unheard of. I know it's done other places, and we just got into it a little bit. We didn't spend a lot of time on it. But is that potential that we could look at?
I think, Mr. Mills, I think the Budget Task Force looked at that, and we had a presentation on that from the fire chief. And as I recall, there are some limitations on that. Several years ago, we had a fee like that. We had a first responder fee, I think it was called, or something similar for the fire department. And the problem is that it wasn't covered by Medicare, and insurance companies, it says if it's not covered by Medicare, we're not going to pay it. And so we were kind of in the situation of imposing that directly on people often who couldn't afford to pay those things. And after a couple of years, was dropped. We took it off there. As far as some of the charges that are charged now by the existing provider for ambulance services, I don't believe the city has the ability to impinge on that area or to get into that business. And perhaps, I don't know if the fire chief is here, but he might be able to explain it a little bit better than I have, if you want a further explanation.
We don't have to have it. We don't have to have it now, but it might be something that the chief may want to talk to us about later.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Ponier.
Yeah, could we talk a little bit about SB 621 and potential impacts there?
Well, that committee was recently established. We have not even met yet, so don't really know what the potential is going to be from that, looking at the percentages of how they're going to, the formula for how they're going to even divide things up. I don't think that they've made the appointments from the tribal representatives as of yet. No.
Mr. Mayor, maybe for the benefit of the audience and just explain what we're talking about
Yes,
here.
please.
SB 621 is the establishment of the Indian Gaming Revenue Fund, and it's where each individual tribe that has a casino pays into a fund, goes to the state, comes back down to the county, and a committee is formed at the county level, and I believe the mayor is a member of that committee. And via recommendations of the committee that are authorized or approved by the individual tribe that has a casino within your town, you can get grants from that money. So we're not sure exactly how much money that would be, but it could be a substantial amount.
However, there was only a total of $10 million that are being allocated to Riverside County.
To the county.
To the county. And then that has to be allocated from there to the individual tribal governments within the county.
Right.
And I would also add that it may be a year till we see any of those revenues.
Okay.
Misvote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one comment on that, and then I have another question. Was the fact that I read in the Legislative Digest that Riverside County was trying to add a couple of additional people to that committee from Riverside County, from the county itself? Does that mean that the county is hoping to take a much larger portion of that money than they normally would have?
I don't know that to be a fact. I think that the fact that we have more gaming tribes in our district than any other district, I think that was more the issue.
Okay.
And the actual composition of the committee is set by legislation, so they would have to actually amend the legislation.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what they were trying to do, was my understanding. Anyway, I want to just follow up on Steve's question about the process from the departments. When you ask the departments to submit their budgets, is that a process that the department head would be working with all of their department staff to come up with that budget, and how are they being encouraged to cut that budget?
It varies department by department. In a very small department, it might be the department head himself who puts together pretty much the entire budget. As far as whether departments are asked to cut or not, that's going to be a decision on the part of the city manager to present a budget that says, here's how we balance the budget. I came in and I asked all the departments to cut 10% of their entire budget, and this is the cuts that we're recommending, and this is the impact. These are the impacts of those cuts. But that's something that the direction we would get from the city manager. As we get a little bit further, once we get the original submissions back from the departments, we'll know better what the numbers are we're dealing with and what approach might work best and what he's going to be recommending to you.
I mean, it's my firm belief that line staff always knows more about cutting expenditures than sometimes department heads do, and I think it was clear in that very innovative contest you ran about how to save money for the city that you had so many entries. I mean, some of them probably weren't valid because you couldn't do that, but I think that that's an important thing to do, is to encourage our staff from, from the typing pool to, whatever. I don't know what the structure is, but to contribute to the budget reduction, because I don't think anybody wants to see us lose staff, and I think that I see Chief sitting over there with his hand with his chin in his hand, thinking about how badly he's going to get hit. So I really would encourage them to do that.
And I'm sure most department heads do solicit information from their staff. I certainly do, and I think most of the rest of the department heads do. And just to one clarification, though, the contest you referred to, what we named here is the Back to Black contest, and it was getting information or getting ideas from city employees. But I didn't really run the contest. It was really my administrative assistant, Maureen Fox, who ran that. So I can't take any credit for that particular part.
Well, it was innovative anyway.
City Manager, I was just thinking about Ms. Folt's comments, and I would think, and I know in the past when we've requested cuts from the various departments, I think that's what we received. But I think it would be important to me that everyone would participate in this process because it affects us all. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I think I would add, though, instead of looking for cuts, creative ways to increase revenue.
Oh, absolutely. That's what the contest was about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
But I think in the process of the budget, whichever way we're looking, that the involvement of everyone, because we're all in this together.
And actually, Mr. Mayor, if I might add, because I know the city manager's voice is not with him right now, during the department meetings, actually the city manager has been trying to get various ideas from the department heads. We've been looking at the Back to Black contest entries and asking the departments to look at those individually to see if there's a way to implement them within either their departmental structure or organizationally. So we're trying to find creative methods and means of trying to incorporate not only those suggestions, but looking at other things so that we can actually be a little bit more cost conscious on the things that we do.
Mr. Mayor? I had a question on one of the worksheets we kind of went through quickly. I may have missed this the first time through. Page 7, which is the future budget projections. Under appropriations, line 37, which is a negative appropriations from savings of $1.3 million each year. Can you explain that, please, Mr. Kanar?
Well, each year, Mr. McCullough, we budget the full amount of salaries, and that's what you see up in the line above there. And inevitably, there are vacancies during the year. People retire, people quit and move on, and they get replaced, but typically we don't replace them the next day. So those positions become vacant. And so we always have some salary savings. We have the attendant fringe benefits, PERS, health insurance, and so forth also are saved if the position is vacant for a little while. And generally, most departments are very good about not going out and spending every last dime that they have in all their operational accounts, office supplies or travel and training or whatever. I think, it's not a spend it or lose it kind of philosophy that we have. We try to budget what you need during the year, but if you don't spend the money, it doesn't mean your budget automatically gets cut next year. It just means you have to justify or re-justify your request. So those all play into it and turn into the savings. We're hoping it's $1.3 million. Some years it's been a little bit more than that, some less, but it's been pretty close to that average.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if this would be an appropriate time, we could talk about the current city hiring practices, since Mr. Kanar gave me an excellent segue when he talked about vacancies.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask Tom one more item before we get into that, and really not ask, but just to comment for all of us to think about. We're really dealing with 04-05 current budget, but Tom has got the figures for 05-06, which we have seen, and as the picture is painted, as bad as this upcoming one is, the following year is even worse. And we need to be thinking now of 05-06 and make sure that what we're doing, whether it's revenue generating, tax generating, whatever, that we are covering that projection too in 05-06. So I'm happy to see that there, Tom, and so thank you for adding that on there.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. At the last council meeting, Councilmember Mills had asked what the city's current hiring practices are. What we've passed out to you is the current vacancy summary of all city positions that are currently vacant. As you can see, there's currently 15 and a quarter positions that are vacant, and there's the different classifications of vacant positions. The next attachment that we've provided is the current list of allocated positions that the council has approved. This currently shows that the city has a total of 449 and 3/4 authorized positions that the council has allocated. While there's no hiring freeze at the present time, I will say that the current policy of the city manager is that all recommendations from department heads to hire employees come to our Personnel Review Committee, which is held weekly, and that is comprised of the city manager, the personnel director, and myself, and we review those recommendations of the department heads and make the final determination whether to fill the position that they are seeking. So while there is no hiring freeze at the present time, positions are evaluated closely by the Personnel Review Committee, and a final determination is made by the city manager as to whether or not to fill or not to fill a position.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mills.
Troy, it's kind of unfair that David can't talk here, although maybe he planned it. It is my recollection that during this last budget review and last budget that and I'm qualifying that it is a recollection that the report from the city manager's offices was that we were not replacing employees that left as a general policy, and yet that's not what I'm hearing. What the procedure is now. I mean, and I could be completely wrong. I could be assuming something, but I'm pretty sure that's what I heard. Yet we have hired since that time on, and we are still advertising for some spots. I think I personally think that we need to look at what we do here in the future, because certainly what I don't want to get into a position to hire somebody and 4 months later tell them, well, we had to cut. It's that I'd sooner not hire the person, and we do. I think we all need to look at what the responsibility is here with the deficits that we face for the next 2 years, and you can't get around the fact that the big number, up to 75% of the budget or whatever it works out to be, is employees one way or another. And so I think we need to look very closely at that item. And there are certainly some spots which I well understand. I mean, we are required to maintain certain staffing in the fire department. We are entitled to maintain certain staffing in other places. But I think we need to look very closely at the hiring practices from now on. So a comment on that would be appreciated. Like I said, it's not really fair to David.
Yeah, I don't. I might be able to make a quick one, and then Troy can finish. What you say, Councilman, is absolutely correct. We've only been hiring those essential dispatchers, policemen, and firemen as absolutely needed. The cuts we made last year, the 17, those cuts remain permanent. So our hope was that budget reduction would help us, but the rules are starting to change so fast again in Sacramento. We're going to have to get into this process soon. So in essence, on one hand, in my mind, there is a hiring freeze for anything that's not absolutely essential. Now there's a couple coming before us relatively quickly, i.e. the assistant city clerk, which is needed but may not be as essential as a fireman or a dispatcher. And that's the decisions that we're going to have to make in the very, very near future.
and an additional qualifier is back in October when the city staff brought forward the positions in the development services departments to help augment their staffing levels. We predicated that recommendation on the fact that we would bring forward the development fee study, and if the city council approved the development fee increase, then we would go forward with the hiring of those positions. To date, we have not hired those positions simply because the council has not received nor approved any increases in our development fees to cover those positions.
Right.
What the city manager has elected to do, as he stated, is to look at those positions that are critical in nature, that are required either because it's a public safety type position, or those positions that are user fee
Fee-based.
funded, like a position in a particular department that is supported by fees that are charged to end users. Those would be positions that we'd fund because those are self-funded positions. But we haven't been hiring positions if we don't need to hire positions. So while there's no formal hiring freeze, it's an informal practice, and that is something that has to come before the PRC, and the city manager makes a final determination as to whether or not to hire that position.
I understand that, and I'm not specifically talking about any job or anything like that. But if you take the attitude that one department is, say, their fees produce, or those fees pay for that employee, those fees really go into the general fund that comes back to that to paying for that employee. So you're really taking the potential of those fees are still going to come in, assuming the workload gets done. That then that money could potentially be going into the general fund for some other use or whatever. So I just think that we need to have a very steadfast policy, and it needs to be adhered to. And well, enough said.
Mr. Mayor, certainly it's within council's right to give me direction to put a free hiring freeze in place. And I mean, that's where it's coming to, and that's where I'm headed. But if you want to make that as a policy statement, I certainly would hear that.
I would just like to make sure that we look at that in that potential in a future perhaps study session. But I think we need more information on where that takes us. And I know you don't know who's going to be here from one week to another. Not well, kind of, but I think drastic times require drastic steps, and we are looking at drastic times. So,
Any other questions?
Just have a question on the format that you gave us. Does the positions that are allocated but vacant, are they included in the total count that's over here?
The second sheet is the authorized positions, and yes, they would be shown in there because those are the positions the city council has authorized as part of the budget appropriation for the current fiscal year. The vacancy summary sheet are those positions that are currently vacant. So you should find in the roster of allocated positions a custody officer or a building inspector position in that roster. So
it wasn't taken out of the roster. So
no,
it's
always
listed here.
Yes, correct.
Because it would have been helpful to have it listed, another category vacant or filled, so we don't have to.
We have that internally, but we didn't provide that to the city council, unfortunately.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr.
Troy, on that list, on that vacancy summary sheet, certainly planning manager, plans examiner were qualified on the based on the fee increase, development fees. Wasn't there someone in the engineering department was also? Am I missing that one?
That would be the engineering field technician, which is our quote dust inspector.
I see it. Okay, so really those three should have little asterisks next to them in that they're not official yet.
Correct.
Okay. Were there any others like that? Or is that?
No, those were the three positions that were qualified because of the impact of the fee analysis that needed to be done.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I believe I'm missing a couple pages on this. Does everybody have them in sequence? I've got 1, 3, 5, and there's nothing on the back.
Yeah, that's what I have also. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9.
Well, I seem to have all the odd pages too, and I can't understand why I have all the odd pages, but maybe we can figure that out tomorrow.
You weren't doing budget
may-
cuts, were you?
We may also have another vacancy.
Jeez.
But trust me, we do have even pages somewhere.
Yeah. Troy, I'm wondering if you can get back to us on some of these revenue-generating ideas, or what your plan is.
Well, I think internally, the staff will be talking about some of these ideas and trying to flush out a few of the concepts a little bit further. I know the City Council has requested that we bring back a report on the emissions tax. Mr. Kanar and myself are working on such a report. That's just one of several reports that we could generate. Obviously, there's the report that could be done on a public safety assessment district, a landscape and maintenance assessment district, or as Mr. McCullough had suggested, a Mellis Roos. That could also be added to the mix of different revenue enhancement things that the city could look at. There's a number of other potential topics that came out of the budget task force that could be added to that, and I think what we should probably be doing is take that report that the budget task force had assembled and list all the various options that they had looked at and include any of the detailed analysis that we would provide to the City Council to help you understand the different revenue enhancement options that you may have available.
Okay, Ms. Folt?
Mr. Mayor, I think what I also would concur with Mr. McCulloch that we really do need to reconstitute or start the budget task force up again, because I think they did a lot of the legwork that Mr. Usloff is referring to.
Well, if we do that, would it be more, are you looking at something project-oriented, perhaps, to look specifically at the things that we're...
Well, we can give them whatever direction. There was quite a lot of work done on the benefits through Mike's committee, and there were some other ideas that were generated, and I think it was the task force was only together for a couple of months and only had time to think of ideas and never had time to flush them out. And I think that maybe they could be very helpful to staff in flushing out some of the things.
Troy?
Mr. Mayor, while I don't want to diminish the role of the Budget Task Force and the efforts that they had undertaken, I think the problem we face is that we have a budget to prepare.
Right.
And we have little time to do that. And as we know from those members who were on the Budget Task Force, there was a significant learning curve, and it took us many months just to overcome the kind of lack of knowledge and understanding of the city's budget process before we could actually get to a point of discussing various options and recommendations to carry forward. So I think at this juncture, maybe the best thing to do is take their recommendations that they've already flushed out and try to assimilate those into a comprehensive strategy that the council can consider as part of the budget package we'll be presenting later this year.
Mr. Mayor, the members of the Budget Task Force that are other than Mr. McCulloch and myself have agreed to continue on that task force, so the learning curve would not necessarily be there. I'm not suggesting that a new task force be created, but that task force be encouraged to do some specific work, because there's a lot of talent on that task force. They're very familiar with the budget and can hit the ground running.
I would agree. But I guess my concern is they're in the budget development process, and we only have, 4 months really to get everything together. That's why I was asking, do you want them specifically to research certain things and come back, which is more task or project oriented than doing the whole thing, unless we're going to focus on the next fiscal year?
Well, I don't know what Mike thinks, but I think they could take some really narrow, defined areas.
Okay. You have a suggestion, Mike? Yours.
I think that it would be, as Mr. Butzloff mentioned, it would not be a good direction to get a whole new budget task force, as it was very painful, and there was a steep learning curve there. I think it would be good maybe to ask Mr. Stiles to reconvene the budget task force, its remaining members, and say and ask, because I think we need to really ask them if they want to continue on or not. I think some of them did and some of them didn't, and maybe get a report back from staff as to whether or not they are going to continue. And I think they would be able to be almost similar to a commission of the city, to where we can ask them to help in certain areas and advise us in certain areas.
Okay.
But it would be specifics, in my opinion. Not
We
general.
can make the request of Mr. Stiles to see if there would be any interest in reconvening the prior members of the task force.
And I think we could also look at if we wanted specific assistance in projects or something as well, because I think they'd be cooperative in almost anything that we ask those who are willing to participate. Mr. Mills.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think the list of potential solutions that we received this evening from Tom, there's some items on there that are currently being worked on. Starting at the bottom, downtown parking structure cost, downtown parking. We are looking at potentially with EDC. We've got something coming up on that in the near future, I think. Annexations, I know we're working on Park Andreas, Belamonte. Hopefully those will keep coming. I'm curious as the next one up. I've heard a little information on selling naming rights, Tom, and is there some potential to get an idea of what kind of revenue generation and what we have to do? I mean, I know that it could go all over the place, from putting somebody's logo on your city truck to naming the skate park, as you noticed, so.
I'd wear a bowling shirt if they paid enough, but I think something like the skate park, and that was just meant as an example. Maybe the city council wants to keep it Palm Springs Skate Park and not have a name associated with it. But I think some preliminary discussions that we had way back when we were first looking at funding sources, you could be looking at $500,000 naming rights for a facility of that sort.
I think it's something worth looking at, as you've said here. Tom, how soon do you think you're looking at being able to give us some information back on the refinancing?
The redevelopment agency bonds that I talked about, I think we'll be bringing that back to you about April or so. I mean, it's at the point where the interest rates are now, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it would just be the format or the, how do you want to keep the same term and just take the maximum savings per year? That kind of decision to make. Certainly you should do it. We would sell the bonds in June sometime and then call them. They come due in September. So probably about April for that one. A couple of the other ones that we're looking at, I'm not sure exactly yet. Some of them are easier to say that it's a good thing to do right now. Some of them are a little iffier propositions, and so we're just looking at all of our bond issues, and we'd like to, might be something we could bring back at a study session and just go through all of the bond issues that we have, and some of them we're not able to refinance because either the interest rates are so low or we've refinanced them a couple of times already, and just go through them and say, here's our suggestions.
Let's vote.
I would do it sooner rather than later, because the bond yield right now is good for the interest rates, but the projection is that the interest rates are going to be going up. So we're going to do it, I think we do it sooner than later.
We'll do them as soon as we can.
Okay, I think you've given us some great ideas in terms of potential solutions, and periodically, if we can get a report on any or all of these, and we can make a determination and establish some priorities as we go along on some things that we definitively want to do, and perhaps place in our lower priorities some of those things that we know that we don't want to do. And if there are no further questions on item number 1, we will take a 10-minute break. We will call this meeting back to order. We'll move to item number 2 on our study session agenda, development fee study.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you recall, the Development Task Force made a number of different recommendations regarding staffing, improved technology resources for the development services departments, streamlining of the rules and regulations that we abide by. In addition, they also made a recommendation to the council to pay for these suggested changes that they were proposing, of looking at our development fee structure to take a look to make sure that the fees that we're charging for the various services that we render at the counter are appropriate for the amount of costs that the city incurs. In September of last year, the city retained the services of Muni Financial to evaluate the city's fee structure for planning, building, and engineering services. Over the past 3 months, the city's consultant has been interviewing staff, reviewing data, and developing a fee model which reflects the direct and indirect cost of the services that we render to calculate a user fee that pays for the cost of those services. Tonight, our consultant, Jeff Wakefield from Muni Financial, is here to present his findings on the development fee report that they have generated. He's going to describe the approach that was used in determining the cost of service analysis for each department that was analyzed. He's going to look at the fee structure that's currently assessed and the amount of existing subsidy of the fees that the city currently is providing. He's going to make some fee recommendations, and finally, you need the report. And finally, he's going to compare the fees that he's recommending to that of the other Valley cities here in the Coachella Valley. After Mr. Wakefield has made his presentation, I would then ask members of the Development Services staff, Mr. Evans, Mr. Barakian, Mr. Duckworth, to come to the table, and they can field individual questions about the fee calculations that were used in determining the fees for their particular department. And I'd also ask Mr. Evans to specifically focus in on the practical application of the proposed fee structure that's being presented tonight to the City Council. So that, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'll have Mr. Wakefield make a brief presentation about his fee study. And if people need copies of the report, I certainly have them here for council, and members of the public can also have a copy.
Thank you. In addition to Troy's introduction, we looked at not just the current planning, building, and engineering fees, but also we looked for potential new sources of revenue that we could recommend here. The first step was to sit down with the planning, building, and engineering fee schedule, your current fee schedule. Sit down with your department heads and review those, and review fee schedules from other cities in California. Based on that, we've come up with 12 new proposed fees into the analysis, and we've identified the cost of those, and that obviously identifies additional revenue there. The approach that we use is actually quite simple and straightforward. For planning and building, the planning and building fees, what we do is, first of all, start out and analyze the full cost, the fully burdened cost of each staff position within planning and building and engineering. You'll find that in the last 3 pages of your handout. These labor rates include, obviously, the direct costs, the salaries and benefits. We've also added to those indirect costs, such as supervision and administration, materials and supplies, as well as general fund overhead that Mr. Kanar alluded to earlier. Basically, the cost of city manager, finance, human resources, etc. The end result is fully burdened labor rates for each staff position. And if you'd like to me to go through that in a little more detail, I'd be happy to do that. The next step for planning and engineering, if you'll turn to the fold-out pages.
Which is table 1 in your packet.
The first one we come to is planning, and I'll use this as to illustrate our approach. The first on the left-hand side of this handout, you'll see each application for the planning department, planning division, identified. For each one of these applications, we met with staff and simply had them identify primarily the average time spent on each one of these services. we simply took that time and multiplied that against the fully burdened labor rate of each staff position. And in the first column here under total cost, you'll see the result. We took that cost, compared that against your current fee, and in almost every case, identified that your current fee is not sufficient to recover your actual cost of doing business there. Next step to figure out what the fiscal impact is of the in terms of the subsidy, we identified, had the department identify the annual unit volume, which means simply the number of applications you go through for each category. And we take this number, apply it to the subsidy, the per application subsidy, and in that middle column there, titled existing subsidy, that's the number, that's the, just the amount that you're losing on each application type on an annual basis. So to start out with, for administrative minor modifications, the city is subsidizing that service by $8,564 annually.
Where are they? Up the top.
If you travel down to the next, down that column and onto the next page, you'll see that on an annual basis for the planning division, the total subsidy, in other words, the amount that you're essentially losing on planning applications, is $360,000.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you how you want this to happen? I mean, if we have questions, shall we save them till the end, or shall we?
I don't know
ask
if you prefer to give your presentation first and then come back for questions. It
I think
doesn't.
Jeff's able to answer questions as we come.
Okay.
That's fine.
Then by all means.
Okay, could I just ask on the total cost, is that just the wage, or is that also, do you figure in all the fixed costs?
That's what we call the fully burdened cost, which includes salaries, benefits, materials and supplies within the division.
No, does it include what the cost is for the electricity for that particular part of the building, or those kinds of costs?
Yep. Electricity costs, building maintenance, building depreciation, equipment depreciation, support from your IT staff, et cetera. That's all covered in the overhead component.
Okay.
I might refer Councilwoman Foat to Table 3, which is the breakdown of planning and zoning, their hourly rates. As Mr. Wakefield had indicated, the different cost factors that are built into the overall fee study are listed there. You have your supervision and administration, your benefits and material supplies, your special charges, and those are all built in as central overhead cost into the actual hourly rates. So you can see the listing that are up there. That's how they determine the actual cost by position.
Table 3, correct?
Yeah, there's table 3, 4, and 5 that represent the individual departments, and they're also displayed up here on the boards, so if any member of the public would like to go look at them too.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this point? Please continue.
Sure. Once the cost and revenue analysis was complete, what we did was identify what the fee for each application would be at full cost recovery levels. That's if you look under the recommended fee column, that's what you have identified there. We also identified options at less than full cost, specifically 80% of full cost and 90% of full cost, to give you an idea of what the fee would look like at those options. In addition, we provided information in regards to what your neighbors charge, benchmark information for your information, compared these fees to Indian Wells, Palm Desert, Rancho Mirage, Cathedral City, Riverside County, La Quinta, and Indio. This same procedure was applied to the engineering division as well, with the idea of identifying the full cost of each application, the full cost of each permit, and comparing that to other cities. The subsidy, the total subsidy there, similar findings. We found that for almost all services, the city is subsidizing the cost of that service. Revenue equals less than your cost. For engineering, we identified the subsidy is $100,000 per year. 99,000 actually on an annual basis. And that information for engineering is presented on Table 2.
And actually, Mr. Mayor, if I can make a correction, the Table 2 that Mr. Wakefield is referring to did not make it into your package. We'll get a revised Table 2 to council, but it is displayed up there on the board. There was a late entry that was sent to us today. And as a result, we had to print it out, but we couldn't get it into your package, and it wasn't reflected in this report. But the subsidy amount that Mr. Wakefield did mention, $100,000, is the amount that the city currently subsidizes engineering services.
Is that an odd or an even number page?
Good point.
For the third department that we reviewed for building, what half of building is fees are based on hourly rates, deposit and an hourly rate basis. Those are for residential applications. And what we've done two things in building. Number one is reviewed their hourly rates, and again, you can see those calculations as Mr. Bootsliff identified up on the board and in the back of your study. So through that method, residential fees should be 100% cost recovered. Also, what we've recommended after discussion with the department is switching over commercial fees from a valuation-based system to also to a time and material system, so the department would be fees would be fully on a time and materials basis rather than valuation based. And through that method, buildings should be 100% fully cost recovered. In addition to...
And Jeff, if I may ask you,
Sure.
What's the statutory provisions that allows the city to do 100% cost recovery?
Well, state law under the government code 66014 states that you can charge the estimated reasonable cost of providing a service, and that boils down to you can't make a profit. You can't charge a profit on government services, development services, and that's what we've adhered to throughout the entire study. There's two more fees to note that sort of come out of that extend beyond any one division. The first is a general plan maintenance surcharge that we're recommending, and several 15, 20 different jurisdictions in California have adopted this surcharge. It's simply a fee to recover the periodic updating of the city's general plan. Updating a general plan is a very expensive undertaking. What we're recommending is that the city apply a surcharge against building permits to fund, as I said, the eventual updating of the city's general plan. We've identified that the annual cost or the one-time cost of updating the city's general plan would be about $600,000. If you amortize that cost over 10 years, which is the typical useful life of a general plan, you come up with an annual need of about $60,000. And this surcharge would fund that $60,000 per year. Again, that would be applied against building permits. The second fee that we're proposing here is what we call a technology surcharge. Again, Many cities have already implemented this fee. Many more are looking at this. This is looking at the city's new technology costs, permit tracking system, I think primarily.
I think, Mr. Mayor, that may be somebody's cell phone. Does somebody have a cell phone that's currently active? Well, if somebody had a cell phone that was currently active, that would be the noise you just heard.
Certainly not be a city council member.
No, no.
Maybe that was the move it along hint.
Yeah, the curfew.
We are on page 20, Mr. Mayor. Page 20 now.
The technology surcharge, in essence, is you can see the total cost identified. The annual revenue this would generate is about $69,000, and largely would offset the cost of permit tracking system and other GIS and some other technical costs that you see listed here. Again, that would generate about $69,000 per year. I don't know if there are any questions at this point.
Mayor?
Mr. McCullough.
Back on page 11, which is table 1 for planning, I was having a little trouble with the fees charged by other cities. There's a lot of dialogue in some of these, and some of them appear to be blank, and I'm not really sure. And then the ones that do tie, for instance, let's look at one line here. It's change of zone. Recommended fee $5,400, Indian Wells $1,600, Palm Desert $325. I mean, it doesn't look, these things, and some of these lines are all blank. Is this I don't know if these are totals or there was no comparable data or what. I'm having a little, it doesn't look complete to me.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, it's difficult to match up services from one jurisdiction to another, and I think that's what this largely reflects. I also know that talking to Mr. Kibbe today, that a lot of other Coachella Valley cities are also in the process of undergoing fee studies and looking at raising their fees as well. So these, a lot of, I think, your neighbors' fees will be adjusted in the upcoming budget as well. But essentially, it's what you're seeing is a difficulty comparing apples with apples.
But, Mr. McCullough, it might be helpful. We're fortunate that the building industry recently did a study through the Rose Institute, and I'll pass this out. This shows the fees that are charged throughout the Coachella Valley and how the city of Palm Springs compares for building fees, engineering fees, planning fees, impact fees, and environmental fees. And if you would go to the chart labeled total fees by category, it shows you the different fees that are charged and where Palm Springs is on a total basis for those fees. And you can see the other cities. Palm Springs falls towards the end of the cities in terms of their overall amount that they assess. If you look at the same chart, and this would be the first page, total fees per unit in 2003, Palm Springs is actually second to last in the Coachella Valley on a per unit basis for the amount of fees that are charged by the building, engineering, and planning departments. We come in at $16,408.24 per unit. Cathedral City, which is last in the Coachella Valley, is at $504.41. So this may be a more helpful analysis to show you how we fall in terms of our total fees versus the other valley cities. Because as Mr. Wakefield said, it may not be comparable in all cities in relationship to the types of fees that they charge. Some cities charge fees by different names. Some cities don't charge that fee. So trying to do an apples-to-apples comparison of a fee may be difficult at best.
You are Mr. Segway tonight, aren't you?
Well, you know, while we're on that issue of segues, I'll pass this one out too. This is also out of the BIA's study. And what I asked Mr. Wakefield to do was to take the development fees per unit for Palm Springs using the BIA numbers, which they compared 1999 to 2003. I had him lay in the proposed fee increase using the same data from 2003. And as you can see, looking at the two columns there, 2003 using current numbers and 2003 using the new or proposed fees, there's about, a little bit over a $700 difference between the per unit cost for the fees that we would assess, which amounts to about a 5% difference. So if the council were to adopt 100% cost recovery of the fees that are being proposed tonight, the total impact on a per unit basis would be 5%, which is not a lot when you think about it. But this kind of gives you just a comparison here, how the fees would be assessed and where they would fall in terms of the 2003 current numbers versus a proposed increase in those fees.
5% person.
Mr. Wakefield was regaling to me earlier tonight that in some of the cities he's done fee analysis for, specifically the city of Kingsburg, they had a recommendation for a 300% fee increase. Was that across the board?
And Modesto, though it's in their planning department, but Modesto was across the board.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. McCullough.
I have another question, and perhaps Mr. Mills can articulate this better once I bring it up, because he was a part of this discussion as we both were on the development task force. He was the council member at that time. And that was, and maybe it was outside the scope of this, but how the fees were determined, not just the fee, but that there was a possibility that there wasn't the proper valuation or evaluation of the project at the time the fee was assessed, and that was going to be looked into also. Now, I understand this is just the fees, but is that like the next step, or is that part of this study?
Where Mike was headed was that what we were talking about was evaluation for plan check purposes at the counter when a project is brought in. That was what that fee was. That currently the method of evaluation is really whatever the applicant puts down versus reviewing the drawings and updating on a square foot per type of project a list of whatever a more accurate cost would be. So.
That made issue. And I think you're referring to building and safety fees. Again, we would be moving. Our recommendation is that the building division charge commercial fees on a time and materials basis, similar to the way that they currently charge fees for residential developments. So, again, project valuation wouldn't impact the city's fee in that regard.
So, and you do that on when an applicant there would be an estimate of the cost, that fee would be paid. If there's any money less, it's given back. If there's any more charge, it's the applicant would have to pay that.
Right. It would be a deposit
basis.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Has that been, as far as tracking those hours, that becomes a much larger nightmare? Is there a proven system that you would suggest in handling that?
The county of Riverside currently
oh my God,
uses that system. Recovers. They charge all their fees based on a time and materials basis, as well as I said. You're currently using that system for residential projects, so there's a feeling within the department that that's doable and feasible to extend that system to commercial.
And I might add that Riverside County's fees are among the highest all the way through the package here.
Yes, they're conscientious about their recovery.
For a quick question, Mr. Mayor. When a contractor comes in and says, and somebody can give me some information here, the project is only going to be $10,000, and have we ever requested the bid from the contractor to see that it's really $50,000 or $100,000. I mean, quite often, I think, as we all know, the numbers come in and we may be losing opportunities.
I'd ask Don Duckworth, our building and safety manager, to speak to how we treat those types of situations.
Well, the way we'll do it is, if someone puts a bid in and you say it's $10,000 valuation, it's green. Excuse me. If an applicant puts $10,000 valuation on the project, and obviously we assume that it looks more like a $50,000-$60,000, we will ask to see a copy of the contract. Especially, this happens a lot with re-roofs in particular. To answer some of the other question, if a project comes in, yes, we do normally ask their valuation on a commercial, and we'll do the same thing. If he says it's $500 all it's going to cost, and he doesn't have a contract on it yet, we'll go ahead and use the table 3A, take a square foot rate, determine a valuation, and do an estimation on and base fees on that.
Do we actually go out to the site sometimes and do a physical inspection?
Occasionally.
And you know, just spot check a few of them to see?
Occasionally we will do that, yes, just to determine the scope of work.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
I think, though, Steve, what is being proposed is a method that makes that go away. It's strictly on a cost basis. So it doesn't make any difference if it's a 15 square foot project and it takes 100 hours to check it because it's complicated, then they would pay for the 100 hours, not based on what the valuation is, which I think is going to increase revenue.
Okay.
And it's a fair method, I think, as well.
It does reward those developers who are, have their inspections done when they call for an inspection, and you're able to have a little more control over what you pay.
Are there any other questions?
Has the BIA seen this study?
Yes, we in fact did email it over to them. Mr. Wakefield did have a conversation today with Mr. Kibbe, although Mr. Kibbe said that he didn't have enough time to thoroughly analyze the report. He did have a few comments, and I'll ask Mr. Wakefield to speak to those comments that Mr. Kibbe did raise.
You pretty much characterized the conversation. He wanted a little more time to look at it. Wanted a little more of the work papers behind the study, specifically the time requirements on an application on a category basis. Also wanted to have a look at the cost allocation plan, which identifies the general fund overhead that gets factored into the study results. He wanted to take a look at those items before, before he had a final say on gave it a blessing or not.
And we certainly want to encourage Mr. Kibbe to look at this, and if he has any questions, to either talk to myself, the development services staff, or Mr. Wakefield, because we want them to understand the approach we've taken so that we get their support. I think what they'll realize, especially in light of their recent study, Palm Springs is on the lower end of the cost for planning, engineering, and building services. We're not recovering our costs that we're entitled to under state law, and I believe Mr. Kibbe will see, based on the cost allocation plan that Mr. Wakefield has developed, as well as the fee model, that we've done everything that we can to show that our costs are lower than the actual, their fees are actually lower than the cost for that service, and so we would be justified in setting our rate at a much higher rate. And then it's up to council whether to set it at 100% cost recovery or some other level. But certainly Mr. Kibbe is an important element in this, and we're going to encourage his involvement.
Ms. Funk.
I have another question. If we were to implement the 100% of the suggestions as they are in here, where would that put us in this graph?
Well, you have this matrix here, which shows that would put us at 17,159. So if you take the color chart and you look at the total fees per unit, 17,159 would put us right after Indio, between Palm Desert and Indio, so basically in the middle. And just so the council's aware, Indio just recently went through a similar exercise where they looked at all their developer fees and increased them significantly. It actually was printed in the Desert Sun how the cost of a garage sale permit went up, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 400%. So this is not uncommon, and as cities that are experiencing high levels of development and growth, they're looking carefully at their development fees to make sure that they're actually recovering the costs of the services that are being provided.
Council, do we want to give any direction this time?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
Just one more question
Sure.
before we go, and it's, and,
Before you throw out that magic number.
yeah,
Okay.
let's throw that out. In the case of the building department and determining the deposit for plan check, how is that handled? And the reason I'm asking the question is, it's a lot easier to give a guy a check back than it is to ask him for another one. And so, no matter if he thinks you're high on the inset. So I'm curious as to how that happens, because I'd sure like to give people money back versus asking them for more. So
I think I'll have to defer that to Mr. Duckworth.
Currently, for the single-family residential, we're under the Paladin Group, and what they have already estimated is approximate hours it would take to conduct a proper plan check, and by that we would determine the deposit fee. And for the most part, it comes out pretty close. The same with the inspections, and we do write a lot of refund checks at the end. There are some that do have to come in and pay a balance. We collect that balance prior to final inspection.
And Don, do they offer the same type of tables for other types of work other than residential, or is that something that we have to create?
We would have to create that. All we have right now is for the single-family detached home.
Okay, thank you.
We could work with the city to come up with ways of creating simple deposits especially for commercial projects. One method might be to use the current valuation system, add some sort of a marginal factor to that, and use that to determine the deposit amount, but then charge on a time and materials basis.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
I think we've received some very valuable information, which really told us what we thought we were going to hear anyway. But I'm encouraged by the fact that we have the potential to generate additional funds to pay for services that we do perform, and thusly to justify, without going into the detail, the additional staff that we had talked about earlier. So I don't know what the exact next step is, but I would assume that we need to formalize this proposal and bring it back to us for as an action item, legislative action item.
Do you want them to bring it back with the proposals as stated, the 80, 90, and 100?
Well, we're looking for direction tonight whether the council wants us to go for full cost recovery, which is our recommendation, that we set the fees at 100% cost. If that's not what the council desires, we certainly can look at some other factor, whether it be 80, 90, or something in between. There's a number of other types of applications or permits that the city does issue that we may want to lower just because it encourages certain types of development, or it doesn't penalize for, like, on administrative appeals. We want to set a lower rate than 100% because we want people to be able to afford to appeal something if they have to appeal something. And I know Mr. Evans has done some preliminary work on certain permits and fees that he feels that probably should be lower than 100% cost recovery, and we certainly could provide that as an analysis when we bring this back to council as part of a legislative action you would take probably the first meeting in February.
Ms. Folt?
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to ask is, are we required to do 100% across the board, or could there be some areas that we would do 100% and some areas where we might only do 90 or 80%? I'd like to have that kind of a
The
study.
only
I'd
limitation
also,
is you can't go past 100%.
No, I know that. Well, maybe you could. And I'd also like to have, to request that the BIA kind of give us a summary of what their views are on this, too.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Kirby will be there at our council meeting, but I think that's a great recommendation.
Yeah, but I'd like him to give us something in writing, actually, if he could.
Okay. Well, we could request that. Are you, do you have any specific areas for the amounts lower than 100%, any specific areas, or you just want staff recommendations?
I staff recommendations.
Okay.
I wouldn't presume to know what that would be.
Are there any other recommendations? Mr. Mills?
I wonder if I could ask Mr. Evans to come up to the table a second. Okay, thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
On page 10 of the report is the newly proposed fees. Have you had an opportunity to review those, and do you have any comments on implementing those?
The revised fees, we work with the consultant, and we developed the actual hours, and then we work back in with their numbers on the cost. We're comfortable with all of those, and what we've tried to do on Final Plan Development District, we've never charged a fee for final PD, and yet we're reviewing sometimes a bundle of plans that big for hours. So we took that and broke it down, and it's a new fee that allows us to actually get recouped for some of that work. The sign permit by staff, that's probably one of the fees that we probably want to subsidize. If you want compliance with the sign ordinance, you need to make it very cost effective for people to want to come in and get a permit. And I'd suggest that we take a look at our existing fees. A few years ago, we used to raise $50,000 a year alone in sign permit fees. The council said that's very expensive. It was a percentage of the cost of the sign. And, you get a big hotel, we get a $5,000 fee, which really wasn't proportionate to the amount of work. At that point, we cut the sign permit fees dramatically, and I think we estimated the revenue to go down to $12,000 a year. But sign permits, minor architectural approvals, some of the fees that really affect our smaller customers, not our commercial customers, are probably the ones that I would suggest just to get people to comply. We take a look at that, and if you take a look at the key area, minor architectural approvals by staff, that is table 1. Left-hand column, come down to architectural approval. Staff and Planning Commission approval for minor architectural approval. If we were to keep the fee where it is, we subsidize about $32,000 a year. We could probably move that fee up to about half of the recommended fee and be in pretty good shape. But again, that's the condominium owner that wants to put a new patio on, and that's the planning fee, and that covers the time at the counter, the field trip, the administrative review, and the like. But if you get that fee too high, I can guarantee you we will not be called business friendly. I can tell you right now, the planners dread telling people about this fee schedule because the fees go up a lot, as you can see. And the one thing you have to know is you don't come in and pay for one fee to get a planning permit. If you do a project like Mountain Falls, you're going to come in and get a plan development district, a tentative tract map, an environmental assessment, public hearing fees. So it's cumulative. And instead of charging a $5,700 fee $5,700 fee, we're talking about a fee in the $25,000 to $28,000 fee. So that's sticker shock. I can tell you that you'll have customers that will say, boy, that's an awful lot of money for a planning fee when you add it all up. But you have to keep in mind, we're going to be working with that customer for 4 to 6 months. We're going to have community meetings, neighborhood meetings. We're going to have public hearing lists of 400 people. We get the phone calls from everybody. So most people don't understand the amount of work that really goes on behind the scenes for a larger project like that. But I think some of our commercial customers, when you take a look at how the fee schedule adds up for a big project, the fee will fairly significantly change, and a developer will tell you that's risk money. The application filing fee is risk money because they don't have an entitlement. It's not like when you buy your building permit where you've already financed your project and you walk out of the building with something to actually build. A planning fee is risk money to a developer, just as the plans and exhibits and special studies that they have to do. But again, to give you some ideas on how that works, the way the fee schedule is today, a remodel over at the Parker Meridian Hotel, formerly Givenchy, we just took it to the Planning Commission today, and I can tell you we got it approved in a couple of weeks. They were quite pleased, and the architects never left New York. The fee for that planning application would go from $210 under the proposal to $650, an increase of $440. A commercial customer like that, with a 2-week turnaround, they're going to say thank you. It would have cost them more to send a half a person across the country to even attend the meeting. We told them you didn't have to attend it. FedEx Ground, fairly straightforward industrial building. And I want to just give you some ideas because these are cumulative. They're not just line items that people pay for larger projects. FedEx Ground, it's an industrial building, about 32,000 square feet up in the north area near the Orr subdivision north of I-10. Current fee would be $1,840. The proposed fee would be $9,390. And we're doing, in that case, we're doing an environmental assessment for them in about 3 weeks' time. And they're going to be to the Planning Commission in 60 days or less, which was their goal. And they're going to probably be ready to go under construction about 30 days thereafter because they're very fast. Would that commercial customer be unhappy? Probably not with that time, because if we can meet the time schedule, they save money. Every month of delay, if you're carrying several $1 million, eats up our planning fees pretty quick. But we will have people that will be unhappy with that because it's risk money up front. The way our current fee schedule works, we subsidize the fees at the front end. There is a planning fee that the building permit, at the building permit stage, that's a value-based fee, which we can't do anymore, where we do recoup some of the planning cost when somebody buys a building permit. This is basically front-loading those fees. You pay for the services when you use them, as opposed to a subsidized fee at the front end, and then when you buy your building permit, we pick up a little extra money based upon building permit value. But I can't justify a building permit value fee. I have to really go back in and look at hours allocated. So that gives you a quick overview. If you'd like to see, we've compared about 2 pages worth of different types of projects. They're real projects, real files that we're working on. So we didn't do theoretical comparisons. We'll let you know you can see which customer would pay a different fee if they reapplied.
Yes, Troy.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. If the City Council were to take this issue up in a future City Council meeting and approve the fee increase, I would certainly recommend, and I've seen this done in other cities, that we take some time to do a fairly substantive educational campaign to not only increase public awareness about these fees, but to also help educate and help the development community about why we're doing this and what the new fees mean to them. The City Council certainly can look at picking an effective date for the fee increase, either 60, 90, or 120 days out, so they wouldn't have to go into effect immediately. We could post notices at the counter. We could give everybody who's issued an application a flyer or something else that's printed with the new fee schedule on it so they understand what's going on. We can meet with the EDC, with the BIA, and other stakeholder groups that have an interest in the development in the city of Palm Springs to educate them. So there's ways that we can neutralize or mitigate some of the sticker shock that Mr. Evans had mentioned. This is not uncommon. Cities across the state are doing this all over the place, and so it's just a matter of how you present it and how you educate the community as to why you're doing it.
I think that's a great recommendation. And in as much as even if we want 100%, it only puts us in the middle. I don't think it will be as much of a shock if they're doing construction in the Coachella Valley, just the difference in Palm Springs. And I think we could easily add that to our recommendation at that time.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
Also, and I agree with that 100%. I think, though, in this particular business, time is money for us here too, and I think we need to implement this as fast as we can. I do think, though, and I think that's where Ms. Foat was headed, was that we need our 3 department heads, our affected department heads, to do what Doug just did and tell us what fees they feel we may want to back off on the 100%. But I personally would like to do 100%. I understand Doug's logic, and I'm sure Don may have some logic, and Dave as well. So if they could get that back to us as soon as possible, and then we could, and with that, perhaps a marketing campaign about how to handle it. And then we could take action on that all at the same time and move along.
When are you planning to bring this back to us?
I think at this point, we'd probably bring it back to you the first meeting in February, because we still need to meet with Mr. Kibbe, get his comments, try to refine the numbers a little bit. As Mr. Mills said, we want to get all departments to make their suggestions and recommendations for fees, and so we'll be prepared to bring it back to you the first meeting in February.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Fox.
That was where I was going, because, I mean, there's just a simple example here, which is a real small example, but if we go through all of these, there are certainly a lot of other examples. I don't want to see the fee raised from $15 to $21 for a garage sale, because, I mean, we have enough trouble trying to get people to pay that $15, and that's usually people who have garage sales. They're not normally people who have lots of money. So where we're dealing with little, with little things where somebody's adding a patio or something onto their house, I think we can look through, and that's what I meant. Maybe I wasn't clear of the 100% versus maybe an 80% of what the recommended fee is.
Okay. I think if we have additional suggestions, we can get them to staff before that time. Just on your recommendation, though, I mean, we have so many people who have yard sales constantly. We're supposed to have,
No
what is it,
permits.
two a year? So I don't think the $5 difference is going to make a difference based upon what we're currently experiencing. But
That's an enforcement problem, because they're not supposed to have 5
well,
garage
this is
sales
true.
a year.
This is true.
Mr.
So,
Mayor.
Perhaps that's what we need to look at. Is that included in that fee structure, the enforcement of that?
Code enforcement? Could it be?
Whether or not it's being enforced, or the cost of enforcement? Sure. I mean, that could be included, but I mean, if you did that, I think the original concern is even more valid, that they're not going to pay that fee.
$80.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Is it? But couldn't the cost of code enforcement be spread throughout the entire department, because it does apply to every specific application? Or potentially
you could. You could. That's considered the future cost of enforcing building codes, and as such, the health and safety code allows for a recovery of a portion of code enforcement costs. But that's one of those items that is you're sort of pushing the envelope, but you could do that.
Better than licking the envelope.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Butzloff, can you, on this one schedule you gave us on development fees per unit, we saw that these increases were going to be a 5% increase in the overall fees. How does that reconcile with the examples that Mr. Evans gave us, where we had a $1,500 fee going to a $9,000 fee. Is he just pulling one odd thing out? I'm having trouble 5% seemed very small to me, but 4 times seems very large to me.
Yeah, if you look at, if we're all looking at the same graphic here, if you look at the bottom category there under planning, for the year 2000, under the current schedule, a tentative track map, you see that identified as $1,640. If you go to the right, that same development would pay $9,700. So you can see that the increase within planning is fairly significant, as Mr. Evans identified. The increase within engineering is less significant as a percentage, and the increase within building is also less significant as a percentage. But overall, it totals up to a 5% increase.
Mr. Mayor, I think that makes it even more important that Doug closely look at those fees, because if you're talking about a condominium owner who wants to put a patio and boom, 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 as we've seen in the budget exercise that we went through, you're looking at a lot of increased revenue from building and planning and so forth. So I think that example that Doug gave was a very good one with the condominium owner, and those are the kind of examples, in addition just to the numbers and the recommendations, I'd like to see, because it puts it in real life terms.
I think you're right, but I think overall we need to look at if that person may be upset, but that means everyone else is going to subsidize that person's project. And whether or not we're going to say to that person, this is your project and you pay for it yourself, or the rest of the citizens are going to subsidize it. So it's not going to be an easy thing, but if there are no other questions, you have direction. Thank you very much, Mr. Wakefield, for your presentation and staff. And we will move to item number 3, role and structure of the boards and commissions. Mr. Alshire.
Yes, on this item, pursuant to the council request, we've given you quite a bit of information concerning the boards and commissions. We've actually listed all of the commissions and outlined the work programs which those commissions have adopted pursuant to the city's current procedures. Also, we've attached some of the enabling documents, basically the resolution that sets the process as to how we appoint commissioners. There's a listing back here of the major commissions and their function. Also, there is the resolution back here that deals with the council cabinet, how we go through that process. Now, I'm not quite sure how extensive of a presentation the council wants. I could go a little further and talk to you about the resolution concerning the appointment process, especially for the new council members and how that's set up. But perhaps you don't really want any further staff report and you want to focus this more on what the duties and responsibilities of the commission are. To that extent, rather than going through and talking about each commission, I could answer questions. So it's kind of, Mr. Mayor, how much of a...
I think this request came from Councilmember Foat, so perhaps we should defer to her where she'd like to see this go, and we can see if we have concurrence. Ms. Foat.
Yeah. My questions regarding the commissions were I had several of them, but I think the ones that concerned me most is that the commissions, as I see them and as they're structured and as they meet, handle things that are brought to them. And we have not requested from the commissions a evaluation of the things that need to be handled. At least that's what I wanted to report on, because to my knowledge it wasn't. So, for instance, let me pick one out. The Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission has been one of our most active commissions and has done a really, really good job on several issues in the city. But I wanted to know if there was any kind of, for lack of a better word, visioning process where the beginning, that we required at the beginning of the year for the commission, that they look over the entire, all of the human rights issues in the city and do some sort of a status as to what they were going to accomplish during that year. Now, on some commissions that would not be possible. I mean, like the Administrative Appeals Board, I don't think they could do that. But on some of the, like the Historic Preservation or the Arts Commission or even the library, to see where so we knew as a council in the beginning of the year, we have a benchmark. By the end of the year, this is what would have been accomplished. So that was one of my questions. Another one of my questions was in looking at the appointments to the various commissions, are the commissions themselves participating in what they want to have from us as we do these interviews? So if I use again the Human Rights Commission, do they send to us a list, or do we do that in the advertisement? We could really use some people who are experts on immigration, or experts, and I'm making this up, on gay and lesbian issues, or whatever it is. Do they do a criteria or a job description for the holes that they see they have in those commissions? And those were a couple of the questions that I have, although I have more.
Well, I think there are 3 points there that I'd like to comment on. First, I think your first point was, to what extent is the commission able to initiate? Is it just responsive to things the council's asking it to get involved
Not
with?
the degree that they initiate. I'm asking if the beginning of the year there's a work plan set out.
Yes, well, let me.
So that at the end of the year we have something to see, to judge how that commission contributed to the city. Or because in the reports that I read, this was just like, this is what we've done. And, some of them have done a tremendous amount of work, and some of them maybe their reports don't reflect that.
The
but-
resolution that establishes the commissions tried to provide that it is that each commission at the beginning of their year, and the whole process of when we appoint commissioners, that appointment process and their terms is coordinated with the fact that at the beginning of the year, of their fiscal year, they're supposed to outline a work program of things that they want to do. Now, some of the work programs that you've looked at, you may feel they don't go far enough. They're not creative enough. They're not visioning enough. But the theory is that the commission is going to sit down themselves, not being directed by the council, but they're going to outline a work program of the things they would like to do and accomplish. And, they vary the extent to which, using the word visioning, that they're a visioning kind of thing. Now, part of that is supposed to be coordinated with the budget process, so that if the commission needs funding to accomplish those goals that they outlined, they could bring that forward as part of the budget process. And the council in the past years has had some instances where the commission wanted, perhaps with human rights, some additional training. They were going to be involved with mediation, so they wanted some training on how to do mediation, and so they made some recommendations, looked into some seminars and so forth in terms of things that they could do, and then outlined what a budget they would need to accomplish that. And now, the other part of that, in terms of the coordination, is the council cabinet and how that relates, because this work program comes forward to the council. If the council has comments, wants to change it, do something like that, the council can make suggestions to alter, change, modify. And through the council cabinet, the theory is that we're having ongoing meetings. The chairperson is coming forward at the council cabinet meetings. The chairperson will present what that work program was and what they intend to do. Council can react to it at the council cabinet meeting, make suggestions, but ultimately the work program is adopted by the commission itself. And just also, just for your information, most of the commissions and the human rights, for example, there is a provision in the ordinance that says that they are to advise and make written recommendations to the mayor of the council concerning development and implementation of programs. So they have the ability of looking out there as to what's going on and saying, this is a problem. This is a human rights issue that needs to come forward, and they can develop information and so forth and present that, which that commission has been active with.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes, I just served 3 years, excuse me, on the Human Rights Commission, and we followed exactly that procedure. Number one, every year we had a retreat, which was Brown acted meeting, where the commissioners got together and sort of found out what their interests were. We had a document that followed what the ordinance said, and it was sort of our rules and procedures, and it had sort of standing committees and things, and there was more standing committees than there were members of the commission. So depending on the makeup of the commission, they sort of we picked and choose who were going to be, what committees we felt were important, and we volunteered for those. It's a fluid process. The recent commissions have really decided to focus on education, so the forums have been a big part of what the Human Rights Commission has been doing for the time that I served on it. But we did go through that procedure, and at the end of the year, the chair of the Human Rights Commission gives a report, and they go over what we set out to do and what we did accomplish and what we did. And there's an actual formal report that is bound up and given to all the commissioners. I don't know if that ever made it to City Council or not.
Yeah,
so all the things that you're asking, the Human Rights Commission actually did that. I'm just not sure if Council's really aware of that or not.
Yes, well, as a former commissioner and chair, what you've asked for is what we did on an annual basis. I'm not sure if it's been as clear in the past few years in terms of our request from the commissions to do that, but we receive the goals at the beginning of the year, but we still receive all the annual reports. Do we also, and we also receive the goals as well? By March 1st. So we have those. After listening to some of your comments, I'm wondering if, because the area where we have not done as much is on the council cabinet, and that's from the council to, in our communication more directly with the chairs of the commissions to determine what it is that we want and how we communicate with them. I think if there's a weakness in that process, it's probably there, and perhaps that's something as a council we need to talk about more. In terms of redoing and I don't know if that's the ultimate goal or not, redoing the boards and commissions.
No, that was not my goal. My
Okay.
goal was to I could not see from reading some of the history and then reading the reports, and maybe there's a lot of information that was not available to me, and it's certainly not in this packet, of where those goals and objectives are, where their vision was, and then at the end of the year, the final report. And I do not want to pick on the Human Rights Commission, because I think of all the commissions, they're probably, doing one of the better jobs. But the final report from last year was a 1.5-page report. And it was a very informal report. And so it didn't tell me what the beginning goals were or what was accomplished that's not in this packet. So if there's another report that I haven't seen, then I apologize for that.
And I'd also like to add, in terms of the interviews, that was the purpose of the chair being in those interviews, because they would meet with their commission, and they would, if there was a specific skill set that they were looking for, they would know how to look for that and in the application process and also in the interview process as well. So that input was also there. Mr. Mills.
And having been a commissioner for 10 years, well, on one and 5 on another. We started out every year with a work plan, and in the back of the little brown book here, there are several work plans from I don't know if all the commissions are in there, but several of them are in there, and we much in terms of the planning commission, our efforts, our study sessions, and our meetings are geared towards accomplishing those goals, and much like the city council in closed session items, we get as far as we can, based on time and time restraints and other factors. But those goal items you will usually carry over to the next year, and hopefully they can be picked up in that following year. But Planning Commission, I think really all of it, all the boards and commissions do submit, and in fact we deal with them at council cabinet. They are the presentation is made at council cabinet of everybody's work plan, and from meeting to meeting, we maybe do 5 commissions one time and 5 the next, but we do hear those work plans, and other commissions comment on those. Council comments on those. I think the input since we started that process, it's been, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years. Those have been very productive meetings, I think, and to at least to allow the commissions to express what their needs are. I mean, I used to come here and say, we'd like to attend this meeting or this conference, and we'd like the council to potentially give us a budget of $1,500 or whatever, so we could attend that, and the council would deal with that, and could hear the explanation why. And every board and commission made the presentations. We did not do our quarterly one this quarter because of what we're working on right now. But I think, Ms. Fote, if you had the opportunity to see one of those, or not see, but participate.
No, I have seen the council meet with the commission chairs, but I am, if you go through this, some of these reports, I guess some of these reports were like a page. Here's a one-page report, and it didn't really tell me how that related back to, what the goals were, where they felt what accomplishments they felt they had made, what maybe additional help, what challenges they faced during the year, and also where they felt that they were lacking in expertise, so that we, as we go to do interviews, we now interview whoever applies. And I want, as we're doing these interviews, to keep in mind, okay, the appeals board, I'm just going to pull this out of the hat, needs somebody with expertise in real estate. So that I know when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm looking at the kinds of questions that I want to ask that particular person, because I know ahead of time what that commission really needs and where their holes are. And I didn't see that in any of these reports of the goals, accomplishments, what they need, and where they're going.
Well, that generally takes place in the interview process when we meet with the chair. But perhaps what we could do differently is to develop a format, and that we can utilize both in the goals and the outlines from the beginning of the year and an annual report, so that we can follow through with that transition, which could be very good, I think, for the history of new people coming in.
Thank you.
But perhaps at some point, I think, another good thing that came out of those meetings is that commissions also saw ways of working together that we hadn't, that they didn't see before, and how they could really assist, cross-pollinating, I think was the word, with other commissions on single projects, which I think worked out very well for the city. But maybe we want to look at prior to our next council cabinet, what we really want. If our vision for how we handle that meeting has changed, then certainly we're, open to discussing that. Because I think if there's a place where the difference should take place, it's probably there. And what we could ask the commissions for, I think individually, is how they think that they can better serve the city. And what things they need more specifically from us. Now, they generally do that in the round table anyway. Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a question. One of the things on here was the appointment process. We've kind of been holding the recruitment for your annual recruitments to get direction from the council on if you wanted to change that process. So I haven't really started the advertising or the postings or mailing to the chambers and things like that. And do you want me to go ahead and start that then, or?
And by the way, I might just add, because I've worked in 11 different cities, and this city has a very formal process in terms of how to conduct that recruitment. The reason for it is a number of years ago, there was the same sorts of concerns that you were voicing, and so the council tried to create a process and put it in resolution as to how it was supposed to work. It actually specifies in the resolution that there are criteria besides just residency, experience in education, and that it needs to relate to the particular commission. Cultural diversity is specified in the resolution. The person.
None of those are my concerns.
I
read that portion of the requirements, and that was not what I was talking about at all.
Well,
I was talking about in individual cases where someone specifically is needed that has expertise for that particular commission. I want to know that up ahead so that when we're in the interview process, even though they possess all of those things that are on that list, this commission needs somebody with real estate background.
Well,
or
but
whatever.
the issue of education and experience, the fact that in the resolution that is an appropriate criterion, means that if the chairperson says we need this, that is an eligible thing to consider in making the selection. Many cities don't have that indication that you can select somebody based upon that type of thing. But the way the process goes is that there is a schedule to go through with this selection process. There's a screening potential of a council subcommittee to screen the applicants, then an interview process that would involve the whole council, and the council has established that the chairperson of the commission can be present, which allows that input that you're talking about in terms of what kind of expertise they really need.
Mr. Alshire, should we be utilizing a subcommittee at that point to review? Because the last couple of meetings, we just interviewed everyone.
The resolution, and just when the process was created, the council felt, well, we've advertised, you get in, what if you got 20 applicants? You don't have to interview 20 people. So the theory was you were going to create a subcommittee that could go through and say, well, I think there's 6 that we ought to actually interview, and then schedule the interview. And the reason for utilizing subcommittees, you didn't want to delegate it just to one person.
Right.
And you didn't want to end up having to get the whole council together to do the screening. So the idea was to have a subcommittee. Now that's the process you have in here. If you chose to do something else, you could. But one of the things is, you create a process. For a number of times we tried to be pretty religious with it. Maybe the council's gotten away from it. Maybe you want to change the process. You could. But as what Trish is sort of saying is, because we have a number of steps in this process,
right, we need to get started.
You would need to get going with it.
Well, I'd certainly recommend that we get started with our process. But if the council chooses, and I don't know how between now and June we'll have time with all the other things on our plate, but if that's our goal, then we can set some time to look at this, boards and commissions. Mr. Mills.
Mr. Mayor, we have kind of, the last few appointment processes we've gone through, it's been a little bit of nothing really formally as it used to be since Proposition whatever it was. And I think we do need to get back to agreeing on the exact process once we get the applications in.
I agree.
And so I think we do need to spend a little bit of time on that. But I think as far as getting the advertising for the applications, I think we should get on that right away.
You see, our goal was to, because there were so many people who felt disenfranchised in the previous process, that we moved to interviewing everyone. If they applied, we interviewed them. And maybe that's perhaps something we want to rethink for the future. Okay. Are there any other questions on that?
Well,
Okay.
yeah, I have one.
Yes.
The annual work plans are due to the council by March 1st, and perhaps if it's all right with the council, I'll send a memo to the commission staff and ask them to give more of a goal-orientated work plan on what they're going to really be looking for, and perhaps maybe Ms. Vogt, I could give you a call, and you could give me a little bit more information. I could include that in the memo, see if we can't capture what you're looking for.
And perhaps we can let them know that we'll be following that up with a format for them to follow for the future.
Is there also a way, has there been any discussion about talking, is there a financial budget impact with these commissions?
Some.
Yes.
Some commissions.
Staff, because there are no budgets involved.
No, some.
And
Some have budgets.
so we haven't talked about, and I don't know if there is any possibility of combining some of the commissions. I know I did have a conversation with somebody from the Historic Preservation Commission about possibly combining with the Public Arts Commission in some way, which they thought was a very interesting idea. So, I mean, I don't know if the council has ever had a conversation about looking at the commissions and combining some, or are they all active?
There hasn't really been a discussion about that in the past, but that's the sort of thing, if the new council wants to look at that, that's part of certainly what you could get into. In general, the commissions, there are, besides staff, there are some costs with, again, some of the training or programs, things like that they're involved with. But in general, you don't pay the commissioners, and so there's not a big budget. But it was clearly a couple of commissions in the past thought they needed a specific budget in order to do some things they want to do. And so through the council cabinet and coming in this forthcoming period, they got those requests in time to be included within the budget process.
In conclusion to this discussion, I would just like to share that I had a meeting with the Fair Housing Council, and they posed an interesting question to me in terms of our boards and commissions, and that is they wanted to know how they could participate with our boards and commissions, which was something that I really hadn't thought about. And there are several natural places that I think they could, where they could participate. They could always attend, but maybe this is something that we might want to look at for the future, our public agencies and how they might fit into our board and commission structure, because I can see them very easily working with the Human Rights Commissions, and a lot of the issues that come to them, deal directly with housing, the Homeless Task Force, and the Police Advisory Committee as well. So I think at some point when we want to discuss this, maybe looking at public agencies and how they might participate, and which adds, I think, another service component to the community that we haven't had. All right. There are any more questions or observations, points on that?
Are you getting ready to adjourn?
Well, after I make these announcements, yes.
Well, no, we did at the last meeting talk about scheduling an all-day study session. Is this not where we're going to talk about this? We're going to talk about this at the city council meeting?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Okay. All right. There's an art show that is taking place at City Hall, so if you want to drop by, it's the reception is January 29th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. But the art is up until February 27th. There are 76 entries, and they are marvelous. When you walk down City Hall and see all this beautiful artwork, it is truly, truly an enhancement to our City Hall. This film festival is still going on. This is our last week. We're approaching our last few days, so those of you who haven't attended any of the movies, please do. And council also attended the big gala, and the skate park dedication will be Saturday, January 17th, from at noon at Sunrise Plaza. So please come out. And the Martin Luther King Jr. commemoration service, The Dream, Learn It, Live It, Teach It, Sunday, January 18th at 2 p.m., and it will be at Our Lady of Solitude Catholic Church. There is no walk this year, but the program will begin at 2 p.m. The public is invited. And with that, we will adjourn this meeting. Good night, everyone.